Now, the French President Emmanuel Macron is hosting President Zelensky and other key allies of Ukraine as efforts intensify to agree security guarantees for Kyiv in the event of a ceasefire with Russia. Heads of state and delegates from about 30 countries are taking part in the Paris meetings, including Donald Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff and the president's son-in-law Jared Kushner. Correspondents say this is the latest round of intensive diplomacy aiming to thrash out a common position between the US, Ukraine and other allies from Europe and elsewhere to present to Russia. It focuses on issues including how any ceasefire could be monitored, concrete commitments on a multinational reassurance force, and a wider framework of security guarantees. But skepticism remains. Mr. Zelensky has again accused Russia of dragging out the war, and it's far from clear whether Moscow would accept the proposals that Washington has been brokering. With more on this, I'm joined now on the line from London by the author and international affairs analyst, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz. Good to see you, Dr. Laskiewicz, and a very happy new year to you. Tell us more about the main focus of the meetings in Paris. Is it essentially to stop America from abandoning Ukraine?
That is, in fact, a sub-theme, very important one. The formal theme is, of course, to flesh out the agreement that America and Ukraine have sort of reached and to give it more details about the peacekeeping force or reassurance force, as it's called, and also to deal with how to monitor the ceasefire and how Ukraine can be guaranteed security. Unfortunately, none of those things are what Russia wants, so it's very hard to see how this is going to go forward. And moreover, I said sort of agreed, there's this so-called 10% missing, and the 10% is key. It means what happens to the land under occupation, plus the extra bit that Russia wants and avows that it will take militarily if needs be. So therefore, there remain very key issues, and I think one of the more important aspects of this is the sub-theme you've mentioned. Can they bring America along? All the more urgent because of the recent attack on Venezuela and the threat of the invasion of Greenland.
And those are two very important points you make. There is, of course, talk of a multinational force in Ukraine after a ceasefire is reached, and there's talk of investment in the Ukrainian military, but presumably until the US makes clear what it wants to do to support Ukraine, they're likely to remain in this diplomatic cycle while Russia continues fighting its war.
Precisely. The fact that matters is that this diplomatic cycle goes round and round. It's been going round for near on 4 years now to absolutely no end. Diametrically opposed view, Zelensky and Putin, mean that no agreement can be reached, not even a ceasefire. Much of the talking in Paris, therefore, is a complete waste of time, although, of course, it's a pleasant event for people to attend, a nice junketing, if you like. The fact of the matter is, unless Russia has agreed to any of this, it is absolutely pointless, and the multinational, whatever reassurance force they come up with, Russia has made it quite clear it will not accept. Moreover, please note, security guarantees don't really mean anything because they are implicit upon those who give the guarantee actually doing this, hence the so-called Clause 5 in NATO, which means that, in fact, no NATO country has to come to the help of another. And therefore, as such, the whole thing is almost an entire waste of time. The other aspect, and this is a crucial one, what precisely has America said for its security guarantees? Now, we have a problem here. Zelensky has this habit of talking up everything and glossing over problems like that 10% I mentioned, which is to do with what the territory occupied by Russia would be classified as and how it would be run. And here the key point is, President Trump, when you listen to him, seems to have given no real guarantees at all, but just talk vaguely about 15 years without any details. Zelensky gives the impression that everything's been ironed out. So which is the true? Well, we must assume that President Donald Trump is the key person who knows what America has in mind. What is important is that there will be physical people from America at this conference and not just video link, which was the initial suggestion. And therefore, that will give the Europeans and Ukraine a chance to press the Americans. But again, of course, it's not President Donald Trump himself. As such, this pressing may not actually get very far because it hinges on what the president wants and not what his two representatives want. So the long and the short of it is, no, this is just diplomatic cycling.
Well, I mean, you understand these things much better than we do. Is it perhaps time for Europe to engage in direct talks with Moscow within the right framework, as President Macron of France has suggested? Because Mr. Macron seems to be more willing to communicate, shall we say, with Moscow directly.
Yeah, he does do this. It's quite interesting, actually. There's three aspects to this. First of all, France has always seen itself as a power, and this would, of course, put Macron back on the map. Number two, directly. What about Zelensky? The impression here is, if we don't watch out, is Europe will do a Donald Trump and start negotiating with President Putin directly. And number three, President Putin has given no indication at all. He rates the Europeans at all. Moreover, there is now a fourth aspect slowly emerging. It's to do with America seemingly going back to the Monroe Doctrine of 1823, in which case America's belong to it, with the implication that, of course, Europe and those areas by Russia would be Russia's sphere of influence. And the implication means that Putin almost certainly to simply ignore such possibilities of direct negotiation, which don't interest him, to be honest.
Indeed. I mean, I know you kind of touched on this a few minutes ago, but the fact, of course, is that attempts to shape a potential peace agreement so far are essentially between America, Russia, and peripherally Ukraine, and Europe is being bypassed.
Quite right. So Europe wants to have a say, especially because America has made it quite clear it wants Ukraine to sign on the dotted line. And there is a constant implication in everything that Donald Trump says that is to cede territory de jure to Russia. Please note that term. It means legally and not simply treated as occupied territory or something like that. And this is the key negotiating point. And what's more, Ukraine simply cannot step into USA shoes because it lacks the military hardware, both in terms of quantity and quality. All America has to do is switch off all its Starlinks and all the help is given Ukraine. And Ukraine would be very hard pressed to carry on fighting, which is, of course, what President Putin has been saying all along. If it wasn't for the West's help, in particular USA's, Ukraine would have fallen long ago. And so therefore, Ukraine is, of course, annoyed by all this and is trying. That's what President Zelensky is doing, very creditably. And Europe is trying. But I'm afraid the key players are Moscow and Washington, and neither are really in the room.
Well, we shall watch and see what happens next. But in the meantime, we are much obliged to you, Dr. Laskiewicz, for your analysis. Dr. Marek Laskiewicz is the author and international affairs analyst. He was talking to me on the line from London.